For coming along and listening to us. It's now time to deal with emergent language through different techniques that Anastasiia Dereviankina from Moscow is going to share with us. Over to you, Anastasiia.
Hello everyone. I hope you're all doing well. So I'm from Moscow. Yes, I'm an ADOS, and a year ago I did my Delta course, and at that time we were constantly encouraged to deal with emergent language. And to be honest, it was a sort of an eye-opener for me, because before the course I had never heard of emergent language. I had never dealt with it. So, and it was a sort of a revolution for me. And since the time I have experimented a lot with emergent language, and today I'd like to share with you some of the techniques that I use almost every day. So our plan for today, so first we're going to look at the definition of emergent language. So next we're going to look at some examples of emergent language based on the conversation between my students. So I recorded and transcribed their conversation, and then I'm going to share with you 3 activities how I usually deal with emergent language. First, what's emergent language? So here is the definition that I found on the ELT glossary website. First, look through it. Take your time. All right, so I'm going to read it now for you. Yes, and stop, yes, in each and every gap, so when you can type your ideas. All right? So emergent language is language that comes up often. Your ideas? Again, speaking unexpectedly. Yeah? Good. And in the interaction between the learners and or the teacher and the learners, and it's the language that they use. Yeah, obviously, yeah. Thank you. Correctly or otherwise, when trying to express the meanings that they want to convey at that moment, and the teacher can comment on, these expressions, or focus on these expressions. Good. All right, pick up on these expressions and something else work on them for the class. All right, it could be they form learning affordances or any ideas. All right, opportunities that could be exploited on their spot. All right, well done. So here's the definition. Yes, it's something, okay, we are very smart. Yes, we know what it means. All right, so could you please type a few examples when you deal with emergent language in your classrooms? Yes, maybe after some specific activities. So, for example, yes, I usually deal with emergent language after some conversations. Yes, that's what we are going to look at now. Okay, this is a conversation between my 2 students, yes, Peter and Kate. They're upper intermediate students, and they were talking about different modern ways of communication, different apps that they use to keep in touch with their friends. Yes, you don't need to read it now, but what I want you to look at is the emergent language, which I have decided to pick up on. All right, so the yellow color, I used it to highlight some opinion phrases, and green color to highlight some prepositional phrases. So how many opinion phrases have I got? 8, nice. A few concept checking questions for you. And prepositional phrases? Okay, 7. Right. Why? Well, you are the teacher. Yes, you are the boss, and you decide. So the reason why I have decided to pick up on the opinion phrases, at that time, it was the lesson after we had discovered, yes, this topic. Yes, we were talking about different ways we could express our opinion. And during the conversation, I noticed that my students did their best, yes, in trying to use these expressions. but not all of them, and they made a couple of mistakes, so I decided to focus on them. And prepositional phrases, because I find this topic extremely important, especially with the Russian students, so because we tend to translate from L1 into L2 word by word. So that's why I constantly deal with prepositional phrases, because it's something that you just need to memorize. So you cannot just, I don't know, find somewhere that it is to depend on, for example. All right. So, and now I'm going to present 3 activities that I use to deal with emergent language. So the first one is how I deal with meaning. So what I usually ask my students to do is to discuss something first. Yes, in my example, Kate and Peter were talking about different means of communication. What I'm doing at this moment, so I'm writing down some of the good expressions, yes, which I find relevant. So in my case, so it was they were prepositional phrases. What I usually do, I reformulate them if my students make mistakes. So if you have noticed that, so some of them said that to depend off, I would write down like to depend on the card. After that, I usually ask my students to make a list of the topics that they have discussed. And then I ask to match, yes, the cards, yes, which I have prepared, to the topics. While doing that, my students usually try to remember who said it and when, and they use these expressions over and over again. So that's how they can recycle them again. So my task is only to monitor, help them, and support if it's necessary, and explain something. All right? So this is an example how I've done it. So I don't see if you can see it. Yes, some of the prepositional phrases: to be addicted to depend on, and whatnot. Okay, the next technique, yes, that I usually use it to deal with forms. So it's a gap filling. So it's also a very nice way to give positive feedback and to focus on the strengths of your students. What I usually start my feedback with words like, okay guys, well done, and there are some good expressions which you have used. In my case, they were opinion phrases. I usually put them on the board. I rub off some parts of them, and then I ask my students to gap fill them working together, yes, through collaboration and discussion. After that, I collect some feedback and upgrade it if it's necessary, yes, like maybe feeding in some more ideas, yes, and giving more expressions. Here's an example of my board. Yes, that's how I dealt with opinion phrases. All right. And one more technique that I'd like to present today is one more way to deal with forms. I usually use emergent language to deal with word formation, actually. And emergent language is, I use it as the basis. Why? Because I find word formation one of the most important topics in the language. Because if students are aware of like these rules of word formation, it's much easier for them to recognize some words that they consider to be new, but actually they're not new. And in my experience, I have seen a couple of cases when my students ask me like, Anastasia, what does this mean? And I say, okay, let's look at the parts of this word. So that's how I did it with prepositional phrases, actually. Maybe that activity with cards could be the first one, and after that I do this. Yes, I put these words on the board. And I enlisted, yes, the different ways we could form nouns, adjectives, and adverbs, for example, in our case. I always mark roots, stress, suffixes, and prefixes using different colors because it's visual. And so my students are well aware, yes, of all these things. And I usually take it further. I think that we've talked about it today, that sometimes we incorporate some training elements in our lessons. That's what I do. So I not only teach the language, but I also teach how to learn certain things. And for example, with word formation, at some point, we usually, with my students, brainstorm some ways we could store and memorize prefixes and suffixes. Yes, in the next slides, you could see it. Oh. Sorry. Oh, yes. Yes, so these are some ideas how my students store memorize prefixes, and we brainstorm them together. After dealing with emergent language, they may put here some of their findings in their nice tables, graphs, or whatever. So that's it. I hope there was something useful for you. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Anastasiia. Lovely ideas there, great focusing there on emergent language, and also keeping very well to your time slot as well. So thank you very much for your ideas today. We will move straight on